Hello there, guys. How are you? Well, I'm glad you reached the finish line for week one. It's been great getting to know you. I'm pleased with all your discussions and your grades. So you've done very well on your first quiz. You did your syllabus quiz. Some of you may have not looked as deeply into the syllabus as you are now, recognizing that I'm a stickler when it comes to the writing. So I'm looking for you to write using APA style. There is a generator in Blackboard, and it's an APA generator. If you look over on the side there, I think it's the left-hand side, where it says syllabus and APA format information. There's a lot of information there for you. So to help you with your writing, and I'm here. So let me help you. Thank you so much for doing as well as you did on your syllabus, as well as your syllabus quiz and the plagiarism discussion. So let's move on and let's talk a little bit about communication. What we're going to cover in the summary for week one is what is communication and what is ethics. So let's start there. And I recognize that some of you have been on the job and you've been working up to this point. However, this course is a requirement to get that degree, and I am hopeful that I will be able to shed some new light on a topic that you may feel that you are very comfortable with, but I am sure you'll have some takeaways. So first, I want to start with a quote that I got from our text, which states that 14% of each 40-hour work week has been wasted because of poor communication between staff and managers in 1999. Now, that's pretty stunning. However, it is quite some time ago, but take into account 7 weeks a year has been lost. I would love to have a 7-week vacation. How about you? So there's got to be a problem. And herein it lies what we feel has happened. And I personally don't want that to happen to us. So I try to practice great communication. I try to shed good communication on to my students. And so just another little tip on that. In 2017, that number rose to 15%, according to a Newswire article, and at $11,000 per employee per year. So take into account a large organization like where I came from, which was United Airlines, and we had many employees. So $11,000 per employee taking off work, that's a huge loss, no matter how you look at it, right? So what I will review with you briefly is the communication models. The communication models, which you have covered in your reading this week, simply mean that what we're learning about is the messages that you send out. Those messages that you send out should be the messages that are received, but it's not always that way. Although there will be times when that just doesn't happen. We would love for it to be the exact same message. However, it just doesn't happen. And that has to do with interference. So it could be noise, and we call it noise, or it could be interruptions caused by, as the video mentioned to you, a sneeze, a cough. Of course, it could be cars outside, horns blowing, trains. There could be other people talking, but there are many different things that could cause an interruption in communication. Someone could be just standing by you, trying to get your attention. And that is what we call a nonverbal interruption in communication. So the interruption could be verbal, it could be vocal, or it could be nonverbal. Just keep in mind, though, that when these things do happen, and they do, that it can cause a breakdown of communication. Misunderstandings do arise, and the key is to identify the cause and to keep them from occurring again, especially in the workplace, because we need these jobs and we want to keep our job, right? So by understanding the communication models, we can become more cognizant of our own behaviors and pay close attention to our own actions. For example, when we send out a message, it's important to know the frame of reference of the receiver. If we don't know that, then we can at least be aware of our own tone and how the message might be received. Our text identifies these actions and separates them. However, they are a part of a communication transaction, and once discussions begin, it's difficult to know the difference between the sender and the receiver. So what is important here to know is that you must understand when to withdraw and how to proceed. Sometimes we're not sure of what our next move should be during a communication. So the tip that I would pass along to you is the most important aspect of communication is listening. It's listening. And what becomes important is our frame of reference and the differences among each person in the discussion. So we've learned that a message can be visual, it can be verbal, it can also be nonverbal. And once the message is sent, it's evaluated and returned with feedback or a response. And that's something that we just can't take back. So based on the value systems of people is how a message can be received or rejected. Now, today in our workplaces, there are people of all cultures, right? And with these differences in cultures, it's easy for messages to be misinterpreted. Our values are going to be evaluated and compared to others' values. And we have so many different cultures of people in our workplaces who are just not from the same places as we are. For example, I'm from Michigan. I came to Illinois with an opportunity to work for a major corporation, and I have a different background from someone from Illinois. I am explaining myself all the time because I don't know so much about the area, but I learn and I do read a lot, so it's important to try to grasp as much information as you can about a culture versus judging or finding fault. Because I come from one place, you come from another. So the way I would receive the same information that you're sending me may be different than the way that you intend for me to receive that information. If you look on your table 1.1 on page 13, I would like to point out to you that it's very important to understand where Americans are alongside of other cultures. For example, our Asian friends. And we use in the text Japan and Vietnam as examples. If you notice, enjoying life is high. It's number one for an American society. However, in our Asian societies such as Japan and Vietnam, enjoying life is not as high. Enjoying life for Japanese is somewhere like number 9 out of 10. I don't even think it appears on the table for the Vietnamese. So just keep in mind when you're talking to people from another country. We will be studying other countries' cultures throughout the course, and you will be doing a group project on another country. And I'll be explaining that to you more in depth as we continue on in the program. Another aspect is feedback. Now, feedback, how we send it out, is very important because it can be hurtful. And it does take skill. It also takes patience and thought. So where we actually arrange to give the feedback is also equally important. So it should be a place that's comfortable. It should have some ventilation. It should not be overheated. And you might even bring a box of tissue and have it available, because feedback it is such a sensitive topic. You never know how people are going to respond. However, we have to be aware that we're not hurting another person's feelings. So that's why I am really speaking on this one, because feedback should be behavioral and or evaluative. So just make sure that you really deal with the situation and how the feedback is going to be delivered. Now, communication within an organization can flow in different ways. And one of the ways that it flows is from the top down. And when it flows from the top down, that means an organization has a chain of command from manager to employee. And the same thing can happen from the other way, which is down to up. And that's considered upwards. And that will be when the employee to the boss. That's from the employee to the boss. So the employee can do what? Well, they can give suggestions. They can be able to have their ideas heard. They can go directly to their boss, and they would send those messages directly, which are very good. It's a good way to have an operation ran. But in most cases, that's a great idea, but you may not be able to work that way. Now, there's also a lateral. Lateral, because that's, our text calls it horizontal, which I tend to refer to as lateral, as I mentioned. It just means that along the same lines, everything's fine. It's perfectly fine for people to come together, to work together. And in terms of tasks, depending on the procedures that are necessary for the task to take place, it could be I say, you can come in, you can speak to your boss, you can knock on the door, see if they're available. All of that in a horizontal management style environment is perfectly okay. So the upward communication is where the employee just works on achievements and their progress, and his or her opinions and feelings are not addressed unless the employee makes a formal request. And that would be, speaking of coming from a place of need. So an employee feels that they need to speak to their boss. They're going to have some way or another that made sure that they can contact that person. They come in, let them know when do you need to speak. It might be that you have to get on their calendar or something of that nature. There's also something called informal communication. And that informal communication is what we refer to as a term that is used called slang. It's a slang term, and that is called the grapevine. Beware, though, of the grapevine. You will find that many times managers and supervisors will form relationships with employees that report to them, and therefore what they are doing is gathering additional information for their own personal opinions. But beware, because what it does broaden their perspectives on what's going on in the offices. However, you have to be very, very careful that if you're in that kind of a situation, you're not gossiping, you're not discussing someone else in a negative light. Now, inside the organization is something that we have to be aware of, and that's called ethics. And there was a gentleman by the name, and I mean was because he's no longer with us, but his name was Peter Madoff. And Peter Madoff, he made off with quite a haul. He made off with approximately over $60 billion, I believe it was. And from the investors of the company, you're going to learn a little bit about him. You're going to watch a movie, you're going to write about him. But as a result, he's been given a life sentence in prison for his behavior and unethical acts. So I would say that this is where the rubber meets the road. Just be aware that if you are hired in a company, make sure that you know your HR persons, and make sure that you know your ethical codes and the mission and the vision of the organization, and know that you're not alone if you are in one of those top-down organizations where it's not lateral, or you do need a formal request to speak to someone. The HR department is there to support you. The HR group is the mediator for you when you cannot go upward of your manager or directly to your manager. But you can always go to the HR person and explain the situation that's taking place. They will help you out with how to actually facilitate a situation, and now, rather than end up in some kind of hairy situation. However, just know you have to get ready, because they may come to you and ask you about the situation. So make sure you have everything documented, and it's not hearsay, it's all actual. And HR, they can help you from being trapped, or as our text calls it, about how you can get trapped into making decisions based on the fact that someone at a higher level has requested you to do something. If it's not within your value system, you do have recourse, and that recourse is your HR department. So to know what your values are is very important. Very. And I would say to take the skills test on page 22 to get to know your career skills. I will also say that although you're not required to take that you do it, because it can help you. It will be an eye-opener for you. There are other little skills tests along the way, such as the awareness test. And that awareness test, I believe you took. It's important for your role models to understand, to be aware of yourself and your own strengths and your own weaknesses. So I thank you so much for completing your first week and getting to know you has been quite a treat. I learned so much about you, and just know that I will be checking in this way with you throughout the course. I am just an email or a phone call away. Some of you have already contacted me, and I am very quick to get back to you. So do enjoy the course. Welcome to week 2, and we will continue. Thank you very much.